"Fear not," said a strange voice behind him. Frodo turned and saw Strider, and yet not Strider, for the weather-worn ranger was no longer there. In the stern sat Aragorn, son of Arathorn, proud and erect, guiding the boat with skillful strokes. His hood was cast back, and his dark hair was blowing in the wind. A light was in his eyes, a king returning from exile to his own land. "Fear not," he said. "Long have I desired to look upon the likeness of Isildur and Anarion, my sires of old. Under their shadow Elisar, the Elfstone son of Arathorn, of the house of Valandil, Isildur's son, heir of Elendil, has naught to dread." Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I want to revisit an older series, The Families of Middle-earth, and discuss the line of Elendil. Now, as it is with many lineages of Arda, if I talked about every member it would definitely take multiple videos, and to be honest, not every member is as important to the overall story as some others, so today we will take a look at the members of Elendil's house that I believe to be most important to the overarching story within Middle-earth. I will also not bog this video down with dates and years, as that would be a lot to handle on top of all of these names and lineages, so please check out some related and helpful articles in the description and cards, along with some related videos. Indeed, in the writing of the script for this video, I realized how dense and confusing this information may be, so a special shout out to Tolkien Gateway and its articles for helping me organize my thoughts, and it is my hope that you all use their articles and the appendices of The Lord of the Rings where much of this information may be found for more information about these kings to understand them better. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. First, let's talk a bit about Elendil himself and why he was important. As the son of the last Lord of Andúnië, he was already important as a descendant of Elros and Eärendil, being of an offshooting branch of the line of the kings of Númenor. Yet he was more important than that, as he was also the leader of the faithful Númenorian faction that maintained tradition and upheld the virtue that was once quite present amongst most all Númenorians. He led his faithful followers, along with his sons Isildur and Anarion, to Middle-earth, where his high kingdom, Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south, was established. He fought Sauron directly, and alongside his friend High King Arenian Gil-galad, saw the overthrow of Sauron at the end of the Second Age. His heirlooms, the shards of Narsil, the ring of Barahir, the scepter of Innuminos, and his greatest treasure, the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor themselves, would pass on to his descendants, who were great and important actors in the events of the world. Now let's begin with the realm of Gondor, since the kingship faced more uncertain successions than the Kingdom of the North did. The first important characters here are, of course, both Isildur and Anarion, who were joint kings of the realm. But Anarion is really the one who stands out here as important, for his city was Minas Anor, later Minas Tirith, and Isildur's city was Minas Ithil, later Minas Morgul. And together these two brothers ruled from their seats in Osgiliath. They were important as Gondor's first kings, except for, of course, High King Elendil, yet after the initial invasion of Sauron that started the War of the Last Alliance, taking Minas Ithil and sending Isildur into the north, Anarion and his Gondorians held the line against Sauron for years, until the host of the West was ready for war. After this, Anarion would be a commander at the forefront of the conflict until his untimely demise from a stone tossed high from Barad-dûr. Yet it would be his descendants, rather than those of Isildur, that would rule after Isildur's death at the disaster of the Glidden Fields in the early Third Age. We'll discuss Isildur more with the Arnorian side of things in a bit. Anarion's son was Elendil, who was mentored by his uncle until his time to rule came. He was important mostly for the sake of his lineage and his name, as Elendil's lineage was of the utmost importance until the coming of Aragorn to be considered the King of Gondor. Going down the lineage a few kings, I would say the next king of major importance is Tarustar Rhumendekil I, who had victory over the Easterlings for a time, but was partially responsible for continuing Gondor's participation in wars with the Men of the East that would last for thousands of years. While he didn't start these wars, he would continue them. He also ordered the tradition of Isildur be written and delivered by the steward to every new king, having in it traditions to uphold as king. Just as the conflicts against the Men of the East are important, I should also say that Teranon Falastur, who was the first of the ship kings of Gondor, was important too, as he expanded Gondor far to the west and south, which would plant seeds for war in the south. He also married the infamous Beruthiel, a black Númenorian who did some measure of evil and was exiled because of it, leaving Teranon the first king of Gondor without a direct heir. His nephew was thus remarkable as the first man who was not born to be king, but was, and he continued his uncle's traditions in the sea, and he was Eärnil I. He and his son and his grandson were the next ship kings of Gondor, fighting battles against the men of Umbar. Eärnil's grandson was Cirihir, also known as Eärmendekill I, as he had victory over the men of Umbar and expanded Gondor, and the men of the Vales of Anduin acknowledged the authority of Gondor. While conflicts would continue in the east with some future kings, and the direct line of kings would break again, and he is the next that I would consider to be important, being Rhumendekil II, who had victory over the Easterlings, like his namesake, with a large force, and he ensured an alliance with the men of Rhovanion, sending his son to live with some of them as Gondor's ambassador, and he also saw the creation of the Argonath, honoring his ancestor Anarion and his brother Isildur. Valakar, which was the son of Rhumendekil II, was notable for marrying a woman from Rhovanion, which set the stage for the Gondorian civil war called the Kinstrife. Then, of course, Valakar's son, Eldikar, was the next important king, and perhaps one of the most important ones, since Anarion himself, as he would be a chief character in the Kinstrife, fight against Castamir, his distant cousin, and the events during his lifetime would also see the loss of the Palantir of Osgiliath, the near destruction of that city, and of course, the continuation of his line would result in less Númenorian blood being in the line of kings, and more of the blood of the men of Middle-earth. There would also be more conflict against Harad and Umbar for the next few kings, and the king Menardil would be slain by the Corsairs, led by the great-grandsons of Castamir himself, as we see the legacies of the Kinstrife pressed on. 2 kings later, we have Tyrondor, who would be the king after the third break in the direct line of Anarion's eldest sons, being the nephew of the previous king, and he would relocate the seat of the king to Minas Anor indeed, planting a new white tree in Minas Anor, as under his rule the realm recovered from the Great Plague. His son was Telumethar Umbardakil, who conquered Umbar. He would have 2 sons who would go on to create their own lines each. The line of his eldest son would almost entirely be ended by the Wainriders, while that of his youngest avenged the line of his oldest, becoming the final 2 kings of Gondor until Aragorn. Therefore, I shall say that King Andohir was the next very important king, as he renewed the alliance with Arnor and would lose against the Wainriders being slain alongside his sons. However, his daughter Firiel would marry the last king of Arthedain, or Arnor, Arvedui, thus reuniting the lines of Anarion and Isildur in the north. Though the direct succession of Anarion from eldest son to eldest son, the practice of primogeniture had failed multiple times in Gondor. The last 2 important kings of Gondor are the ones who avenged Andohir and his sons, and his heir, who was the final king until Aragorn. Eärnil II, who was a distant cousin of Andohir, avenged his kin, and as the hero of Gondor who led the efforts against the Wainriders, became king afterwards, especially because he was descended from the kings. And he would eventually send aid to Arnor to help them against the Witch King with his son and heir, Eärnur, leading them. But during his life, Arnor fell and Minas Ithil was taken by the Witch King and was renamed to Minas Morgul, and Minas Anor was renamed to Minas Tirith shortly after. Finally, we have that final king of Gondor until Aragorn. He was Eärnur, who helped avenge Arnor in the north and aided the elves in the downfall of Angmar, before returning to Gondor and then going off to duel the Witch King in Minas Morgul, and he never returned. Now let's turn our attention to Arnor in the north. Isildur's line was considered to be the rightful kings of Arnor, possibly since he had been the eldest son of Elendil, or for the fact that Anarion never really had many dealings with Arnor as a king. Regardless, Isildur, on his return to the seat of the High King in the north, his father's realm that Elendil had ruled more directly, he was slain. Though many of his sons died with him, Isildur's youngest son, Valandil, actually survived in Rivendell. And after the death of his father, he became king when he came of proper age. Just as his cousin Meneldil would directly rule Gondor, as would his descendants, Valandil would not become High King, and would only rule Arnor. And it is from that line that the kings of Arnor, Arthedain, and the chieftains of the Dunedain would come. I would not actually say that any of the kings of Arnor were very remarkable in the story until the final, before Arnor split into 3 realms, and that was Eärendil, who had 3 sons, and they split his realm into Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rhudaur. Eärendil was also the last of his line until Elisar, it seems, to have taken a Quenya name. as his descendants took Sindarin names instead. Now, throughout my videos, I do actually refer to the kings of Arthedain as the kings of Arnor at times, which is not always technically true depending on how you look at it, for a future king tried to actually reunite the realms under his rule, but I still think of Arthedain as the true remnant of Arnor that remained, as it was intended to be ruled from the beginning. So before we talk about the kings of Arthedain, I just wanted to clear that up. The eldest son of Eärendil, who became the first king of Arthedain, was Amlaeth, and he failed to unite Arnor under his rule, which split the kingdom and started tensions that lasted for many centuries. The next few kings would either see little happen under their rule or not much that regarded them directly. Hobbits entered the north, and Angmar arose. The next I would say to be of great importance was Argoleb I, who did attempt to reunite Arnor under his rule from Arthedain, as no other descendants of Isildur and Elendil actually remained in Cardolan or Rhudaur, giving far more legitimacy to his claim. Cardolan would accept his rule, and again we have this bit of reuniting that happened, but Rhudaur would not, and along with Angmar, Rhudaur and Angmar would fight against Argoleb's kingdom, and the king would be slain after a short rule. After this, I think of it as fair to consider Arthedain and Cardolan as Arnor again, but it depends on how you look at it. His son would be Arveleg I, who drove Arnor's advances back, and with the aid of Cardolan and Lindon. But he too would be slain. Amon-Sul destroyed its Palantir, taken further into his realm of Arthedain. And his son Erefor would push back Angmar's advances from parts of the north with Círdan's aid. I consider Argoleb II, son of Erefor, to be worth mentioning too, as it was he who granted the Shire to the hobbits from his realm. The kings of Arthedain would continue to fight Angmar, and while Ereval won an important battle against Angmar, they were still all fighting a losing war. Therefore we come to Erevel's son, Erefont, who renewed ties with Gondor in the south, and his son Arvedui married Firiel, daughter of King Andohir of Gondor, reuniting the lines of Elendil. Yet this alliance would prove to be made too late, and during dire times for both kingdoms. Erefont's son, Arvedui, who was prophesied to either be the king of a great realm or the last king, was in fact the latter, as after the death of Andohir he claimed the rule of both Arnor and Gondor, yet this was rejected by Gondor, and Eärnil II was made the king of Gondor. Therefore Arvedui lost Fornos to the Witch King, and retreated to Forukel in the north, eventually going abroad on an elven ship only to be slain in the bay when the boat crashed and sank, with 2 Palantiri being lost with him. Yet the Ring of Barahir was not forsaken, nor was hope for men, as Arvedui had had a son with Firiel, one named Aranarth, and while he was not a king, he was the first descendant of Isildur and Anarion both, and he was the first chieftain of the Dunedain, creating many traditions that would last for around 1,000 years. Therefore, while the chieftains lived, there was still hope for the line of Elendil, and I would say our next, most important member of the line of Elendil was Aragorn II, son of Arathorn. He would become the hardiest of living men on his journeys, aid the ring-bearer Frodo Baggins, wield the shards of Narsil reforged into Andúril, call upon those who broke their oath to Isildur, save Gondor, challenge Sauron, and become the first High King of the reunited kingdom of Arnor and Gondor at the end of the Third Age. His son would be Eldarion the Half-Elven, the great-nephew of Elros, who began all of it back in early Númenor, from his mother Arwen's side, who would carry the line of kings forward into the future. And so we come to the end of our tale on who I consider to be the most important members of the line of Elendil. From this tale we see that, though the span of time is great, the lineages of humankind are vast with it, and for all the trials our ancestors went through, whether they were noble or not, we should be thankful that we are all here today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. Let me know your thoughts about the line of Elendil. Are there any important members that I missed? Also, let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this one with the families of Middle-earth. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery, Lord of the Rings swords, statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and use the code WEST at checkout. Please check out our merch and Patreon. Thanks to our Valor Tier patrons and YouTube members, Peter Sheppard, Jonathan Putnam, Molly Sullivan, Blair Scouten, Merten, John Hume, Sam mcbee, Matt Sibbach, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibs, Rhys Jenkins, Anna Petrlik, Anthony Harmon, Dorwin Gray, Arthur Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswald Project, Robert Bogue, and King of Games 2500. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on how powerful was Galadriel. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.